Hey guys, my name is Haley, and we're finally filming a video I've been meaning to film for over a year now, and I've never quite gotten around to it due to all of the things in my life tend to happen in June, and that's when I do all of the Pride Month shenanigans. But this is my Sapphic Ultimate Sapphic book guide, Sapphic book recommendations. I've been planning this for a while. I've been adding to it forever. I just finished a book right before filming this that I'm going to add to the list. I think we have close to 30 books, if not 30, and we're just going to jump right into it because we're going to be here for a minute, hopefully. And yes, sapphic is the umbrella term for women loving women, whether it's bisexual, pansexual, lesbian, anything of that, anything that falls in the umbrella of sapphic. I prefer to use that term. I read a lot of sapphic books. A lot of them happen to be lesbian, but not all of them. And a lot of them are just people figuring out their sexualities and never putting a label on it. So I have a lot of books for you, and we're going to jump right into the recommendations. The first one is one of my favorite sapphic books of all time that had made me sob when it came out. Even before it came out, I had a arc for this, and it was a little too relatable for me, and that is Gay the Pray Away by Natalie Naudus. This is a book about a young girl. It is a YA, so if you're not looking for spice, this one is a good fit for you. This is the story of a girl who realizes that she may be attracted to women, but she has grown up in a very insular community of Christians, and they are specifically very, very, very homophobic. Like, the whole 9 yards. Being gay is a sin. You can't do this, you can't do that. These are our rules, and we will throw you out if you do not follow them. And there's a scene in here that's one of my favorite things I've ever read, and it is the story of this girl going to the library, knowing that her parents would never allow her to get out anything that is considered queer literature. And she checks out a book, and it's One Last Stop, which is also on this list, by Casey McQuiston, and she borrows it, and the librarian sees her trying to steal it and just looks the other way, and she has to take it home and take the cover off and pretend it's a Bible, and she reads it in secret, and it hurts me just thinking about the fact that there are kids who are trying to learn more about themselves, and their parents do not want them to be themselves. This also has a lot of commentary on religious trauma. There's a girl that comes to town. She ends up having a crush on her. This girl is very much does not fit the Christian stereotype, doesn't really want to be there, is kind of forced until she turns 18. And it is their journey, not only discovering what they like about the other and how attracted they are and what to do with all of those feelings as a teenager, but also them perhaps escaping this place that they were forced to grow up in. And no book has ever made me want to throw this in every little free library ever as much as this one has, especially for the hometown I'm from, where there are little free libraries all over the place, and all of them next to a lot of churches, because I can only imagine if teenage girls in those spaces were allowed to learn about people who may or may not be like them, the empathy that could be had, rather than convincing people that how they feel and who they love is wrong. I have a whole vlog of this when I read it 2 years ago, and I think there was a lot of me sobbing in it, so I'll leave that link down below if you're interested. And then we have the aforementioned One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. This girl finds a mysterious girl on the train and then discovers that she's trapped in a time loop and can't be off the train, and she has to figure out a way to save her, but in the hopes of saving her means that she may never see her again. This is sapphic longing at its finest. I love Casey McQuiston. This is my favorite book of hers. Then we have Honey Girl. This is a book I read years ago, and it was one of my favorite sapphics for a while. This is a drunkenly married in Vegas thing. There's also a very niche element in here that I really love in books, and that is that there is a radio show. I don't know what it is about that element, whether it's radio show or the modern version of that is podcast. I love it in books, and it was done really, really well in here. Then we have That Summer Feeling. This is an adult summer camp, and it's a cute little sapphic romance. I don't remember the details of this. I'm not going to lie, I read it so many years ago, but I remember really, really enjoying it, and I know Goodreads says I gave it 4.5 stars. I also have read other books by this author and really enjoyed them as well, and I think she had a new one come out recently, so I might have to check that out for Pride Month. Then we have Kiss Her Once. For me, this remains probably top 5 favorite sapphic books of all time. I know this looks like a Christmas romance. It does take place around Christmas, but it is not revolving around the holiday or even the season, so I feel like it can be read at other times of the year, or you can save it for Christmas. You do you. But this is a story where she meets this woman in a bookstore. They fall in love like overnight. They spend the entire night together. And then she like goes on and just assumes she's never going to see this girl again. And then she ends up accepting like a marriage of convenience thing with a man who needs his inheritance. She goes to the man's house to be his like pretend fiance and discovers that the man's sister is the girl that she fell in love with that night. And chaos ensues. But also, the romance in this is one of my favorite romances of all time. I loved all the commentary. I loved the way they spoke to each other. I loved the angst and the drama of it all. This is a fantastic read. Then we have 2 books by Jay, which was, I think, one of the first Sapphic authors I had ever read back when I was trying to find them after I escaped my church cult and figuring out my own sexuality. And the first of those was Just for Show. And this was a psychologist's fiance breaks up with her right as she's about to like release a book or like promote a book that she's written about relationship advice. And she's like, I can't go promote a book about relationship advice when my relationship just fell apart. So she ends up hiring a woman to fake date for her press tour. But also a nice little fun thing in here is that the woman is obviously an actress, and so she's never quite sure if the woman is just acting every time they're in public or doing all of these, or if they're actually attracted to each other. And it's a lovely little will they, won't they fake dating scenario. And then my other favorite book of hers is Wrong Number, Right Woman. This has my favorite trope in any romance. As somebody who grew up on Klain fanfiction, yes, Kurt and Blaine from Glee, my favorite fanfiction of all time was Little Numbers, which is an accidental text of like Kurt and Blaine, and they like learn to get to know each other over text and then finally meet in person. Peak trope, both for fanfiction and regular books. But this is a wrong text situation. This woman gets a wrong number text from somebody she does not know, and they're asking for dating advice. I think if I remember correctly, it's her asking about her outfit, if it will work for a date. And they kind of just continue chatting to each other. And she basically becomes witness to this woman's string of like disaster first dates with other women. I actually don't know if it was with other women or if she was dating both women and men. I cannot remember. It has probably been like 5 or 6 years since I read this one. But then, of course, they finally meet in person and everything clicks. It's such good longing in this one. And it is, again, my favorite trope. I'm very biased. I've read a few books with this trope. If you know any more queer ones, please let me know. I know there is a male version of things. I think it's called Wrong Number, Right Person, something like that. I have read that one. But other than that, I would love any recommendation of this trope. Then we have another YA, and that is the Falling in Love montage. This is a fake dating, like based on movie tropes. They like are like, oh yeah, we can just like fake date for the summer, and then by the end of the summer we'll go our separate ways and we'll have dating experience. And they are following a like list they have made of movie tropes they both have seen and loved, and obviously fall in love over the course of the time that they're doing this. Very cute YA. Then we have Down to a Science. This is a late in life lesbian. I will say that I've binge read this so quickly, and I do want to read other books from this collection. I believe this is like a Pride collection of novellas by different authors. This is the only one I think I've read of those, and I would love to get to the other ones. I don't know if the other ones are Sapphic though, so please let me know if you're aware. Then we have Outdrawn. This is a rivals in a comic company. They're both like people who are really good. They have their own online famous, like basically webtoon type comics that they've been running online, and then they end up working at the same place and they're expected to work together on a project. They like can't stand each other because they've been rivals online for years, and then they learn that they actually have a lot in common and everything sparks from there. Then we have Girls Like Girls. This is a book that I picked up, I think at a library book sale, had never heard of it. Honestly, had heard of Hayley Kiyoko, did not know who she was at the time. Again, was in a church cult, late life bloomer of queerness. But I picked this up, I sobbed over it. Immediately that night also went and watched the music video for it, and also like binge listened to all of Hayley Kiyoko's music. I know she is well beloved in the Sapphic queer, like lesbian spaces especially. And this is the story of a teen girl who moves to rural Oregon after losing her mother and then falls in love with another girl. And the song is girls like boys do. That's the tagline for the song. And I know there's a movie coming out of it here in like a week, I think, from the time that I'm filming this. And I would love to go see that as well. Classic YA Sapphic. And we have Out of Character. I think I read this one 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And this is a teen girl who falls for her online role play bestie. They do like a role play of this very famous fantasy series in this world. And I will say this is not a traditional romance in the sense that everything wraps up nicely and they're like together and in love at the end. This is more of a character study on our main character, and I actually really enjoyed that we were just getting queer characters as like a story about them, as opposed to like everything ties up in a nice little bow perfectly at the end like most romance novels. I would not classify this as a romance, but the main character is queer. Then we have Trail Magic. This is actually a hometown author of mine. She's from the area that I am from in Ohio, and I found her book at a book fair, like an indie book fair that I went to a few years ago. And this is a Sapphic hiking romance. I always called it a Sapphic version of Brokeback Mountain. It's very cute. I enjoy it very much. She like wants to do this hiking trail to like prove to herself that she can do it, and I really enjoyed the romance. It was very sweet. Then we have This Book Sucks by Piper CJ. This is a Sapphic vampire novella that's set in a Seattle speakeasy. And that's all I'm going to say about it because it is a novella and it's like 100 some pages. Highly recommend. We have Party Favors. This is a Sapphic New Year's Eve novella. I'm also not going to say much about it because it's very short. If you are ever looking for a New Year's Eve book, this is the one I always recommend to people. Then we have Vibe, which is by Liza James, and this is one of the few like Sapphic dark romances I've read and really enjoyed. It's this girl goes to a club one night and falls in love with, I can't remember if she's a dancer. I think she was a dancer. She falls in love with somebody who works at this club and is trying to figure out, because she's never been attracted to women, I don't think, before, and she's very confused by like all of the conflicting feelings she has in this club and kind of becomes obsessed with the girl. I have not read the second book in this, but I also don't think it follows the same couple. So this definitely stands alone on its own. Then we have Our Wives Under the Sea. This is also something I would not classify as a romance. This is the story of this woman who is married to her wife. Her wife is like a deep sea diver and goes down in like submarines for her job. And she goes on a trip, like a regular everyday trip, that was supposed to last like a week and doesn't come back for 6 months because there were complications and nobody knows what happened to her. But she gets back and she is not quite the same, and her wife is trying to figure out how to coexist. There is also like a horror, like almost supernatural-ish element to this, and this is one of my favorite endings of a book that I've ever read. Speaking of Sapphics, I have The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. I read this probably 6 years ago. Do I want to reread it and see if I still like it? No, because I've heard a lot of people whose opinions I really trust who have read it more recently than I have who did not like it. So maybe I was just in awe of the concept of a Sapphic book at the time, because I do think this was one of the first ones I read. But this is the story of a girl who needs the money, so she becomes like a cave diver. She goes down into caves and like has a headset where she's speaking to another girl who is like telling her where to go at all times. She can't really see anything. She's like relying on this woman who's in her ear, and they like form a little bit of a flirtationship in the scary deep depths of her doing this job. I've heard people not love this one as much, but I have very fond memories of it, so maybe people who are not as steeped in the Sapphic books as I am might enjoy this one. It is definitely, it also has a lot of horror elements. Then we have Bloom by Delilah S. Is it Delilah S. Dawson? Delilah Dawson? Can't remember. I also read this one years ago. I'm not going to tell you anything about this except it's a Sapphic that doesn't necessarily have a happy ending, so I wouldn't necessarily call it a romance. But there's a huge twist, and I'm not going to tell you what it is. Just know it's this girl who goes to a farmer's market and becomes entranced by this other woman that she meets. And that's all you need to know. Then we have The Invocations. This is one of my favorite books of, I think it was 2024. I'm not going to lie, the last 2 years kind of blend together because I had so much chaos happen last year. But this is the story of 3 women who end up coming together because they all are trying to solve this mystery of this thing that seems to be hunting other women who have gotten tattoos. So like one of them is like a rich socialite type person, one of them is homeless, and one of them is a witch. And the 3 of them are trying to solve this mystery of why these women are being killed. And it is one of my favorite paranormal books of all time, but especially queer paranormal books. And then we have The Night in Its Moon. This is a Sapphic fantasy series. There are 4 books out. And I heard a lot of people did not enjoy this one. I'm not sure why that is, because I read these and I kept comparing them as I was reading them as if it was like a Sapphic like epic fantasy, and a lot of the beats of this series also gave me the same vibes as the series that shall not be named because the author is a TERF. I'm sure if you're here in queer, you know who I'm talking about. And I love the will they won't they of this because they are two girls who are in like an orphanage when they're younger, and then they get separated, and one of them becomes a prostitute and one of them becomes somebody of like nobility. And they're constantly trying to get back to each other in the chaos of this fantasy world that they've been placed in. There's also so much good talk of religious trauma in here. There's like a character that gets introduced, which I think might have another series of hers. I'm not fully caught up on Piper's books, but there's a character in here who's like somewhat religious and has her like views changed. There's a lot of religious trauma talk in here because Piper herself, the author, has a lot of religious trauma, and I love this series so much. I feel like it's highly underrated. And then we have Bloomtown, which is arguably my favorite Sapphic of all time. This is a duology. It is the story of this girl who is on a train to go meet her husband out in the gold rush era. So they're doing all kinds of manifest destiny out there. She's going to meet her husband who she's not really fond of, but she's a woman in this time period and doesn't really have a choice. She is kidnapped off the train by these little kids and introduced to another girl who is going to hold her ransom, is the original plan. And it goes awry when the two of them realize they are attracted to each other. Joey, who is the romantic interest of this, is probably my favorite character, possibly of all time. Definitely in a Sapphic novel. I love Joey so much. I love all of the talk of manifest destiny and how messy it was. I love all the religious trauma because also during this time period was a big like Puritan boom of Christianity. And it's two girls who are grappling with their own sexuality in a time where you're only supposed to be attracted to men or you get cast out of society. I love this duology so much, and I'm so excited to read her new book. That's hopefully on my Pride DVR. And then we have Say a Little Prayer. This is the story of a girl who has left her church because it was originally in solidarity with her sister who was kicked out under mysterious or left under mysterious circumstances, and then she gets in trouble at school, and her punishment is to go to the summer camp that is run by her old church. And out of spite, she has decided that she is going to spend the entire summer trying to commit the 7 deadliest sins while she is at church camp. But also the trick here is that the pastor's daughter of the camp is her best friend, and she is starting to feel things for her that she is not supposed to, according to the church. And they're spending a lot of time together out in the middle of nowhere at camp. I loved the religious trauma commentary in this. It is one of my favorite books about this because this looks like a silly little like haha revenge cutesy romance. It is so much more than that, and I wish more people would read it. Then we have Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I know about Evelyn Hugo. I read it years ago. I did not like it. I didn't like Evelyn as a character. I did not enjoy the book. This, however, is peak Sapphic yearning to me. Atmosphere is the story of these two girls, or rather women, who are some of the first women in NASA, and they're going on a big trip. And during this time period, I believe it takes place in the 60s, 70s, whenever the space race was. Don't come for me with the history in the comments. I'm sure I know somewhere in the brain. And they are falling in love with each other in a time period where it was very frowned upon to be doing any of that outwardly, but especially if you were in a high-profile job like they were at NASA. Especially being some of the first women to work on things, they were not willing to jeopardize their careers, even though they were absolutely magnetized towards each other. I also think this is a beautifully written book. I love the timeline jumps. I'm usually not somebody who loves big jumps back and forth in timelines. I think it works perfectly in this novel. And then we have Big Swiss. This is definitely falls into the category of weird girl lit, if you're familiar with that. This is the story of a girl who's very strange. Something's a little off with her, and she gets this job where she is basically transcribing recordings of therapist sessions. And she's supposed to not tell anybody. She's supposed to keep everything on the DL. She's not supposed to know who any of these people are. And one day she is out in public and hears the voice that she recognizes. And it is one of the women that she has been transcribing the therapy sessions of, who she has slowly become kind of obsessed with over listening to her sessions. And she strikes up a friendship with her at first and then a relationship without ever telling her that she knew who she was previously. It's very messy, it's very weird, it's very trippy. It's definitely not one I would consider a romance, but it is a crazy ride all the same. And then we have Fable for the End of the World. This is Sapphic Hunger Games. This is basically the story of a girl who lives in the poor side of town. They have these things called, I don't even know what they were called, like angels or something. I read this less than a year ago, I should know. But there are these like genetically enhanced humans that they send out every year to like basically put the poor people in their place, very similar to the Hunger Games. Except it's not a bunch of kids fight to the death, it's these genetically enhanced humans find and hunt somebody for sport, basically. Our main character gets picked, and she is basically going to need to be on the run from this genetically enhanced human. It is all being live streamed, and people are commenting on it. And they break the cameras at one point and end up actually enjoying each other's company, and then it's them trying to escape from this world. I really enjoyed this. If you want something that has Hunger Games vibes that is gay, this is the one. And then we have Elysium Girls. This is a very recent read of mine. This is the story of a town in Oklahoma. I believe it's the Oklahoma Panhandle, called Elysium. It is set in the 1930s during like Dust Bowl era. And while this is not by any means a straightforward like sapphic romance, there are a lot of sapphic tidbits, and it is these gods and goddesses have created a game, and they've basically isolated this town with a bunch of dust soldiers, and it's the game of the goddesses of life and death. And basically, if these townspeople can raise enough grain and like create like peace within their town, and like everything goes according to plan for the next 10 years, then the goddess of life has won, and if not, the goddess of death has won, and then they will kill the entire town. There's definitely still a lot of homophobia in this timeline, so please check triggers for that. But this is one of the most creative historical fictions I think I've ever read. There's definitely like the supernatural element of the goddesses involved, but it feels very grounded in the way I feel like a lot of fantasies are not. So this is very, very under the radar, for lack of a better term. I think it only has like a couple hundred reviews on Goodreads. I found it at a bookstore in LA, and I really enjoyed it, and I think more people need to pick it up. And before we talk about my last book, which I just finished, and I'm going to throw into this because I loved it so much, I'm going to talk about The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School. This is a Sapphic book I've been wanting to read for years, basically since it came out. I know it won a bunch of awards when it came out, and it deserves every single one of the awards that it won because it was fantastic. It's one of my favorite queer books I've read in years. And this is a girl who I don't remember if she gets kicked out or if she just changes schools because she fell out of a relationship with her best friend, because her best friend was extremely homophobic. So please be aware of that going into this. There is also a trigger warning for suicide, so please, I know that might be a spoiler for some people. I would rather be warned going into it. And it's this girl going to her new school. She's like, I'm just going to keep my head down. I'm going to graduate and like move on with my life. And she is struggling with wanting to come out because her mother, especially, is very homophobic. And her mother and father are currently separated because her father was deported back to Mexico. And this is her and her brother going to this new school, trying to figure out their lives and their sexualities. And I loved every second of this. I also quite like the romance in it. And I think it is such a heartwarming novel, despite all of its extremely serious subject matters. And then last but not least, we have Tipping the Velvet, which is the book that I just finished and the only one that I currently have with me physically because I was reading it. And as you can see by all of my dog ears, I'm a little bit obsessed. I've been wanting to read books by Sarah Waters for years. She's like known as the historical sapphic fiction queen. And this is the story that I keep calling my like lesbian theater kid romance. The first like chunk of this book is definitely her like getting involved in the theater, realizing she might be attracted to this woman that she's been performing with and being a dresser for. But it definitely isn't a romance in the regular sense that she has multiple lovers throughout this book. So be aware of that going in. It's not just like these two people fall in love and they're like end game. That is not the case in this book. It is also not given an exact word in this book because of the time period. It's set in the late 1800s, like 1880s, 1890s. But it's basically queer culture in these spaces, especially the poorer parts of the town around London. And our main character goes through a lot. She goes through several lovers throughout this. There's also an entire like section towards the end of it, like the last 150 to 200 pages or so, It is also set around like a socialist revolution, which I thought was so fun. Like one of the main characters towards the end of the book is like a huge fan of Eleanor Marx, like as in like Karl Marx's daughter. I thought it was so interesting. I loved all the commentary. I found our main character a little bit frustrating at times. There's also even like nods to like BDSM in here with one of the lovers that she has, but she has a very, very sad life. And it was a wild ride following her journey from where she starts out and where she ends up by the end of the novel, because it takes place over several years, I think like 5 or so years. It also paints an incredible picture of like how queer people were viewed at the time and how they made their own safe spaces where they could be themselves, whether or not they had the wording that we have nowadays of like trans or like non-binary. I do believe that our main character falls into the more non-binary or trans category, but that is never mentioned here because that was not the language that they used. But it is very sapphic. It has a lot of sapphic longing and just basically speaks very well to the queer experience, in my opinion. But yes, those are my sapphic book recommendations. I think there were 30 of them. I definitely will have more. I have several more books on my TBR for Pride Month that are definitely sapphic, so I will probably end up making another one of these videos at some point in the future. But if you enjoyed this, I would really appreciate it if you would go down and like and comment and subscribe. I will be putting out Pride videos all month. I have plenty of them pre-filmed and planned. And if you enjoyed this and you don't know what to say, please leave me the hearts for the Sapphic flag emoji in the comments down below. But thank you all for watching, and I will see all of you guys next time.